Guys, we live in a broken world where we are seeing children and adult children that are growing up in bondage and slavery to their own emotions and hurt. Today I want to talk to you dad to dad, man to man, about how you can avoid creating father wounds in your children. Today will be a little bit of a tougher conversation, but these are 7 ways that dads can avoid wounding their children. This information is inspired by my friend Pat Morley and his book, From Broken Boy to Mended Man. Hey guys, I want to jump into today's episode. These are 7 ways that we as dads can avoid wounding our kids. See, my kids are adults now, so I've already wounded them. So now these are 7 ways I can go back and fix the wounds or make things right. My kids are phenomenal young men. I have a great relationship. But even in putting this together, I realized, oh man, I didn't do this very well. Oh, I nailed this one. Oh man, I did not do this well. So here are the 7 ways that you can avoid wounding your kids. Okay, here are the ways that dads wound their children. The first one is what I call the dad who is passive. The passive dad. This is a dad who may be physically present, but he is not emotionally or spiritually engaged. Guys, I've said this for years. You will not be remembered by those who love you the most by what you did from 9 to 5. You will be remembered by what you did in the stress bubble from 5 to 9. So when you get home, make sure you are present physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, socially. Be present. Men show up. Dads who are passive when it comes to discipline also wound their children. Do not defer discipline to a teacher or a coach or even your wife. It is your job with your wife to discipline your children together. Disneyland dads need not apply. A man who is unwilling to discipline his children. This is why divorce is such a problem, guys, is that it creates a situation where one parent has the kids the majority of the time, and the person who does not have them the majority of the time has to be very careful about the discipline because those children could choose to not go to that parent. Usually it's the dad. So guys, this is why having our life health flow out of our marriage is so important, so vitally important. It creates a situation where even though you may not be naturally passive, you become passive in your parenting, and that ultimately wounds a child. Do you know 50% of children who are from divorce won't see their dad for an entire year? That is a wound. Guys, number 2, the second way a dad wounds his children is dads who are physically absent. So before we talked about dads who are maybe present physically but not in the other areas. The second way dads wound their children is by being physically absent. And here's what I mean by that. This means not showing up to their events. Not scheduling their job and career around their events. And I know that sometimes your career will take you away from your kids' sporting events, extracurricular events, but for the most part, you need to try and be there, especially if your wife is the one who's there every time. Men, show up. Number 2, not showing up to parent. You are a parent. We have a world being raised by women because the men are absent. They have deferred parenting to women. They have deferred parenting to a stepfather, to another man, to an uncle, to a grandparent. If you produce children, your job is to show up for those children. And really, there's no excuse for not showing up. I have very little grace for men who refuse to show up. So I really don't want to hear your sob story because, man, you're not the one suffering for you not showing up. It's your kids. Number 3 is this, deferring to another man to parent. So when a dad is absent, he defers to another man, and that man raises his kids. And it's really interesting. Most cases of child sexual abuse are from a person the child knows, often a boyfriend, often a step-parent. So you're releasing your children by your lack of involvement to a potential unsafe environment because you have deferred to a stranger. Number 3 is dads who are permissive. Here's what I mean by this. This is the dad who has no rules. Again, a lot of this is divorced dads, right? No rules, no consequences. Proverbs 13:24 has something very powerful to say about the dad who doesn't discipline his child. It says, he who withholds his rod, which is his discipline, hates his son, but he who loves him disciplines him diligently. So our children's behavior, our children are little sinners. And our little sinners, they need to see the consequences. Galatians 6:7-8 says, do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A person reaps what they sow. The next thing by this dad who is permissive is a dad with no expectations. A dad who just kind of lets the kids do whatever they want. There's no expectations for schoolwork, no expectations for anything. This is a dad who is permissive. No, don't make your kids do chores. Our kids, we had 3 chores our kids did. They rotated every week, and we told them, you will do the chores to live in this house. This is how you pay rent. You pick up the dog poop. You feed the pets. You take out the trash. You put away the dishes. You do these certain things. You mow the lawn. This is part of being in the Ramos household, because we love you and we are not going to permit you to be wounded by a permissive parent. We want to be engaged. Number 4 is dads who are enabling. Oh man, we've seen this. This is a dad who, generally speaking, is a good parent, but he wounds his children because he's a bulldozer. He knocks down the obstacles. I was recently telling a group of men, we need to love our kids enough to let them suffer for their own consequence. I ran into a guy about 3 years ago, and he was on his son played past tense football with my son, and he was at this tailgate party, and I said, well, what position does your son play? He said, well, he doesn't play on the team anymore. I go, oh. He said, no, he retired. Well, I'd never heard that phrase. Speaking of a college athlete, I never retired from college. I just wasn't good enough to be a pro, so my career ended. I didn't retire. So when he said that, I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, he didn't get good. His grades weren't good enough, and he was ineligible to play anymore. And I said, bro, your kid didn't retire. He's ineligible because he was partying too hard. And the dad looked at me, but this is this bulldozer mentality. I'm enabling my kid's poor performance. Or how about this one when parents tell their kids, hey, your job is to get good grades. You don't have to do chores. You don't have to pay for your car. You don't have to pay for your cell phone. I'm going to do everything for you. Your job is to get good grades. Man, that is enabling parenting. You're going to ruin your child by not making them pay for the things that were given to them freely. Pay for their gas, pay for their come on, guys, we're better than that. The next one is this participation trophy parent, where, hey, everybody's equal. We're all on the same playing field. Hey, I want to make sure that your poor performance and your poor effort is rewarded the same as this kid's outstanding effort and outstanding performance. That is just not in line with Scripture or reality. Number 5 is this: dads who are angry. And guys, I'll just confess, this is probably where I was the weakest. I often would react and not respond. I'd often say no and then think about it and go, oh yeah, maybe you're right. It's this angry dad thing. It's when your kids, and I don't think this was me, but it's when people around you are living on edge because you walk in the room. In my book, Dialed In, I have a whole chapter called The Calm Man. I dive deep into what the original Greek means. When it says not easily angered, it's the Greek word origlos. And this is the man who people, when they're around him, they walk on eggshells. And that wounds people. Number 6 is dads who are overly demanding. Overly demanding. This is the dad who the kids can never get it right. No matter what you do. I had an experience with my dad. My dad was very aggressive when it came to sports. He looked back on it. He regrets how hard he was on me. But I remember one game I was a 9-year-old playing with 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. I was the youngest kid on the team. And I remember one game I hit a grand slam, and then I got up and I hit a triple. But I ended up getting thrown out at third on a first and third stealing play where they picked me off at third. And the whole way home, my dad just literally cussed me out for that one play, even though a 9-year-old hit a triple and a grand slam. And I just remember thinking, I can never please this guy. It was overly demanding for a 9-year-old. So it's the dad who's overly critical of his children. You don't look this way. You should look this way. Your grades aren't good enough. You should have got a better grade here. You should have put more effort here. And it's a dad who never affirms his children based on who they are, not what they do. So your kids need affirmation because of who they are, who God created them to be as your child, as a child of God. not because of what they do. Number 7, our last reason, is dads who are belittling. Hey, I know a guy who was raised Italian guy, good-looking guy, but all his life he thought he had a giant nose because he raised by a dad who called him hose nose. I know another person who was raised, beautiful young lady, who always had a complex about her appearance because she was called ugly duckling by her dad. Now, I thought, this belittling behavior creates massive wounds. Be really careful about teasing your children based on their appearance. I heard of a marriage, I just heard of this recently, where a woman divorced her husband, and another person, while the husband could not figure out why she divorced him. But, he used to call her cottage cheese butt. Well, that kind of belittling behavior, that does tremendous damage to a heart. And how about this? When it comes to belittling, it's your children are asking themselves, your boys are saying, do I have what it takes, Dad? Your daughters are saying, am I good enough? And when you belittle your children, you are answering that question for them, and the answer is no, you are not. And when you belittle them, you wound them deeply. There are 7 ways dads wound their children: being passive, being absent, being permissive, being enabling, being angry, being overly demanding, and lastly, being belittling. Guys, hey, if this helps you, make sure you copy this link, send it to a friend. We are growing like crazy right now. If you haven't done so yet, guys, make sure you subscribe to the Men Arena podcast, and that would be a huge blessing to us and help us increase our influence in those around the world. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor, hear the deafening roar of the crowd, taste the sweetness of victory, smell the stench of battle, get in the game, get dirty, grind it out, avoid wounding your kids, and be a man. We often forget, guys, that God has called us to steward the bodies he gave us so that we'll be ready, healthy, and spiritually dangerous to fight the good fight. That's why we're so excited to partner with Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Join me on my journey by going to mountaintough.com and getting your free 6-week trial when you type in the code ARENA30. You won't be disappointed. Stay dangerous.